Summer of 1943. Camp Crossville, Tennessee. The German soldier, who had never encountered anything similar before, was transfixed by the brown, bubbling liquid inside the bottle. After spending 2 years engaged in combat in North Africa, surviving on hard biscuits and ersatz coffee. For him, this sugary, fizzy beverage known as Coca-Cola signified the realization of the impossible. It was priced at 5 cents at the camp store, identical to the price the guards said American kids spent from their allowances. During that summer, in American prison camps everywhere, 371,683 German POWs faced a reality that completely overturned all that Nazi propaganda had asserted about the weaknesses of Americans. They found themselves in a country where ice cream was a routine dessert, where soft drinks were commonplace, and candy bars were available in such quantity that soldiers handed them out freely. These basic edibles, sweets unfamiliar even to most German children, systematically dismantled Nazi ideology with more effectiveness than any propaganda effort. Abundance was being measured out in sugar, bubbles, chocolate, and ice cream, illustrating an American manufacturing power that made German shortages seem not a noble burden, but pointless pain. Initial wonder at American sweets would ultimately become wholesale psychological change. The desert came to its conclusion. The surrender of the Afrika Korps in Tunisia in May 1943 brought roughly 250,000 German and Italian troops into the hands of the Allies as prisoners. These seasoned desert troops, who had once forced the British back to Egypt under RML's command, braced for brutal conditions as captives. Nazi information campaigns had led them to expect cruelty and starvation at the hands of Americans. However, mere hours after surrendering, they experienced American K rations. These military rations, which American servicemen themselves frequently criticized, held valuable items: crackers, processed cheese, confections, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar cubes, and cigarettes. German troops, having lived on minimal supplies for months, regarded these emergency provisions as gourmet spreads. As shown in Army records, at North African processing centers, the U.S. military provided pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk, foods long absent from German forces' menus. This prompt provision of superior food to enemies began at once, and only later would its psychological consequences be fully realized. A German officer would later report to the International Red Cross, "We were prepared to starve as captives. Instead, the Americans gave us better meals than our own army did." This initial bewilderment over American abundance started our learning. The Liberty ships ferrying POWs across the Atlantic in the summer of 1943 offered a concentrated introduction to American plenty. These ships, built en masse at unprecedented speed, one finished every 42 hours at the peak, carried as many as 30,000 POWs per month to the U.S. Naval documentation reveals POW rations on board equaled or surpassed the standard crew allowances, amounting to nearly 3,500 calories each day, with fresh bread, meat, veggies, plus coffee with sugar and milk. Refrigeration units, standard features on U.S. ships, ensured all food remained fresh throughout the crossing. Remarkably, multiple record state ice cream was served more than once during these Atlantic voyages. The logbook from the USS General M.B. Stewart in July 1943 notes that on July 4, ice cream was distributed to POWs using the vessel's ice cream machine, which could turn out 10 gallons per cycle. For men who hadn't eaten ice cream since before the conflict, this chilled treat in mid-ocean seemed incomprehensible. When ships arrived at ports like Norfolk or Newport News, German POWs saw an America that Nazi propaganda had claimed was a fantasy. The Norfolk Naval Base, spanning 4,300 acres and boasting substantial waterfront infrastructure, processed more freight in a single day than major German harbors handled in a full week. At port exchanges, which served dock employees, the prisoners observed store shelves lined with candy from top companies such as Hershey, Mars, and Nestle. Military supply records from 1943 indicate that these shops stocked a multitude of candy types, most costing 5 cents, exactly as they did nationwide. The transfer inland by train provided additional learning. Whereas cattle wagons were used for prisoner transport in Europe, German POWs traveled in passenger railcars, where dining cars served full-plated meals. Menu records from July 1943 list fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. Prisoners realized it wasn't preferential treatment, but standard American train fare. The network of POW camps set up throughout the United States accommodated prisoners with facilities that exceeded the requirements of the Geneva Convention. Camp Crossville, Tennessee, representative of larger camps, featured electrical lighting, hot running water, flush toilets, and heated barracks. However, it was the Camp PX stores that left the deepest impression. According to Quartermaster Corps records, the camp stores offered several brands of soda: Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, a variety of candy and treats, ice cream where chilling equipment allowed, cigarettes and tobacco, fresh fruit, snack foods, and beer with 3.2% alcohol content. POWs were paid 80 cents a day for their labor, a wage that later increased to $1. Since both candy bars and Coca-Cola were each 5 cents, an entire day's wage could buy 16 such items, an unimaginable abundance in Germany, where these goods, if they existed at all, demanded special access. Coca-Cola would stand as the emblem of American industrial democracy. The Coca-Cola Company's production during the war achieved exceptional outputs. Company documentation indicates that in 1943 alone, 5 billion bottles were manufactured. The Armed Forces contract stipulated that American service members worldwide were to receive Coca-Cola for 5 cents each. This obligation demanded logistical efforts of an unprecedented scale. German POWs learned that this beverage, unfamiliar to most before their capture, was found everywhere in the United States. All camps were consistently supplied with shipments. Prisoners assigned to work details saw vending machines and cooling units in abundance at gas stations, factories, and schools. Americans from every walk of life consumed it informally, often discarding bottles that were not fully finished. The uniformity amazed technically oriented prisoners. Coca-Cola had the same flavor whether purchased in Maine or Texas, showcasing a standardization in quality control that surpassed anything produced by German industries. The concentrated syrup, created in Atlanta and shipped nationally to bottlers, illustrated a degree of industrial organization that contradicted Nazi beliefs about the supposed disorder of American society. Archival records from the Coca-Cola Company verified that many POW camps were given weekly shipments ranging from 200 to 300 cases, each case comprising 24 bottles. During summer 1943, Camp Hearn, Texas alone accounted for around 7,000 bottles each week. Ice cream in American POW camps seemed unlikely to Germans who had not encountered it since before hostilities began. Nevertheless, Army documentation established that ice cream was a regular offering in camps with the proper refrigeration during the summer. For the military, ice cream was considered so critical to morale that dedicated ice cream production ships served the Pacific Fleet. On July 4, 1943, Camp Shelby, Mississippi's celebration included homemade ice cream. Prisoners watched as hand-cranked machines turned out gallons made from ice, salt, cream, sugar, and flavorings. The ease with which precious materials ice in July, dairy cream, and sugar used just for treats were consumed revealed priorities beyond German understanding. Electric ice cream machines had become available in many camps by 1944. The flavors offered, such as chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and butter pecan, surpassed the selections at German ice cream shops prior to the war. Prisoners could buy ice cream bars or ice cream sandwiches each for 10 cents, or cups filled with various flavors. Military supply documentation shows the largest camps purchased between 50 and 100 gallons of ice cream per week in summertime. While the exact amount shifted with location and season, prisoners regularly enjoyed a frozen treat missing from wartime Germany. The level of sugar used in American POW camps had a dramatic effect. Sugar was subject to stringent rationing in Germany. Civilians, when sugar was in stock, were allotted 280 grams per month. In American facilities, Bowls filled with sugar were left on mess tables for open use. Records from quartermaster logs between 1943 and 1945 document that camps accepted weekly shipments of refined sugar in 100-pound sacks. Sugar was used in large quantities by the camp bakeries. Cakes, cookies, and pies routinely appeared at meals. Mess hall staff sweetened beverages and desserts freely, without limitation. One particular episode at Camp Aliceville, Alabama, highlights the difference. In August 1943, humid weather caused several hundred pounds of sugar to harden and become unusable. Rather than attempt recovery with steam as Germans might, the kitchen workers simply discarded the sugar and requested a new delivery. German prisoners working in the kitchens were said to be upset by the wastefulness. Patterns of chocolate consumption in America reflected a widespread and democratic access. Even under wartime guidelines, leading companies Hershey, Mars, and Nestle manufactured millions of chocolate bars every month. The armed services alone acquired 380 million pounds of chocolate items during wartime. POW camp commissaries carried a variety of chocolate bars. The classic Hershey bar, D-ration bars, emergency chocolate, and different candy bars with chocolate could all be purchased for 5 to 10 cents. Prisoners found out that Americans expressed preferences among the brands, nonchalantly picking one type over another. Monthly Red Cross deliveries to POWs featured chocolate among other goods. Records from the American Red Cross indicate the standard package offered chocolate bars or candy bars, 2 servings of instant coffee, tins of processed cheese, crackers, canned meats, cigarettes, and soap. These parcels acted as a supplement to standard rations, providing luxury foods and goods surpassing the basic food allocations German civilians received. When Thanksgiving arrived in 1943, German prisoners were introduced to the American tradition of holiday surplus. This uniquely American event illustrated a national ability to coordinate and distribute supplies on a level far greater than what German efforts achieved. Army documentation verifies that every prison camp served a traditional Thanksgiving meal of roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, a selection of vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. Supplying turkey feasts to 425,000 PS and millions of American military personnel globally demonstrated remarkable organizational prowess. That German captives were given the identical meal as American troops highlighted a parity of treatment that directly opposed the Nazi racial system. In December 1943, American civilians displayed surprising generosity. Religious groups, civic associations, and private individuals dispatched parcels to German POWs. The American Friends Service Committee alone handed out 50,000 Christmas gift boxes to enemy captives. The contents of these packages customarily included homemade cookies, candies, personal care items, games and reading material, cigarettes, and stationery. Local towns near prison camps frequently offered further assistance. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, residents brought homemade confections to Germans held at Camp Tonkawa. In Hearne, Texas, church members visited Camp Hearne with Christmas candies and cookies. This civilian compassion for the enemy fundamentally contradicted Nazi doctrine. Some Americans, even while relatives battled Germany, still bestowed hospitality on German prisoners, showing strength through mercy instead of revenge. As labor scarcities worsened, German POWs increasingly worked outside prison boundaries, directly observing American agricultural output. By 1944, around 100,000 prisoners found employment in farming and food processing, giving them first-hand experience of America's food wealth. In Michigan's orchards, captives harvested cherries later used in maraschino manufacturing, the vivid toppings for ice cream sundaes. The scale amazed them. Single orchards yielded tons of fruit destined only for decoration. At canneries, prisoners watched quality standards that caused perfectly good food to be discarded for minor faults. Del Monte's 1944 records indicate that nearly 15% of fruit was not canned because of size variations or minor spots, with this produce typically diverted to feed for livestock. Processing sugar beets in Colorado and Nebraska showed a level of mechanization surpassing German advancements. A single American farm could exceed the output of whole German districts in sugar beets. Prisoners learned that production of sugar in the U.S. from both cane and beets totaled about 7 million tons a year, accounting for the abundance they witnessed. German POWs assigned near schools watched as early forms of systematic school meal programs operated. Students were served hot lunches containing milk, a protein, and vegetables. The National School Lunch Act would formally launch this in 1946, but programs already ran during the conflict. The milk service especially stood out to German witnesses. Many schools dispensed fresh milk to students each day. The processes ensuring daily milk at thousands of schools highlighted a logistical efficiency Germany could not match, even for military purposes. A few cafeterias offered ice cream available for students to buy. The sight of children purchasing cold desserts in school, while German kids endured food shortages, made a powerful impression on prisoner observers. When low-security captives ate at American diners under guard, they saw the reality of democratic abundance. These diners featured menus that would suit luxury German restaurants, accessible to all with modest means. Archived 1944 prices list hamburger at 25 cents, Coca-Cola at 5 cents, a slice of pie for 15 cents, ice cream sundaes at 25, and complete dinner specials from 65 to 75 cents. Service was equal. Anyone could select anything, which flew in the face of German class divisions. A factory laborer and a bank executive might eat the same food side by side at a counter, served identically by the same staffer for the same price. As access to American media grew, prisoners found production stats that eclipsed Germany's. In 1944, American production was noted as follows: sugar near 7 million tons. Chocolate and cocoa products, 380 million pounds for the military alone. Coca-Cola, 5 billion bottles produced in 1943. Ice cream exceeded 500 million gallons. Milk reached 119 billion. During the same period, German figures showed sugar tightly rationed and mostly beet-derived, chocolate reserved for military, soft drinks hardly produced, ice cream almost absent, and milk strictly controlled. These statistics, openly published in U.S. outlets, demonstrated that America's war production outpaced Germany's even in peacetime. By the end of 1944, German POWs were sending food parcels to families in Germany instead of receiving them. With earnings from camp labor, prisoners bought American goods for mailing home chocolate, instant coffee, canned supplies. This reversal is documented in International Red Cross logs. German prisoners held in America dispatched around 11 million parcels to Germany throughout their imprisonment, with the majority consisting of food. The effect on German households receiving American commodities from relatives behind barbed wire, while they themselves endured hunger as free citizens, profoundly weakened Nazi beliefs. Rationing instituted by Americans during the conflict exposed the vast disparity between the two societies. Americans grumbled about a sugar ration of 2 pounds per month per person, which was over 3 times the German share whenever it was available. The American meat ration 28 ounces per person each week surpassed the amount Germans were allocated in a whole month. Even with restrictions, Americans achieved consumption rates Germans deemed sheer extravagance. Office of Price Administration data recorded Americans purchasing 74 pounds of sugar per capita in 1944 in spite of rationing tenfold the German intake. In addition to Coca-Cola, prisoners became acquainted with the breadth of the American soft drink market. Pepsi Cola, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, and numerous local brands competed across the nation. The sheer diversity, with various companies manufacturing similar beverages, reflected a commercial plenty unattainable within the German-controlled system. Bottling facilities operated in all major urban areas. The methods carbonation, bottling, sealing, labeling were uniform and proficient. One bottling operation could turn out millions of bottles each year. The supply chain extended to every village, service station, and corner store. By the war's close, American soft drink output approached several billion bottles annually, amounting to dozens per American each year. This singular sector's productivity rivaled whole branches of German consumer industry. The spring of 1945 brought a decisive moment. As U.S. troops swept through Germany, German prisoners in America viewed news footage of U.S. soldiers handing out chocolate and chewing gum to German youngsters. The delight of these youths at receiving American sweets their government could not supply delivered the final blow to Nazi ideals. The difference could not have been sharper. American forces, moving through adversary territory, carried enough confections to distribute freely, while the German government promising victory had delivered famine. Footage from the liberation of concentration camps showed American soldiers sharing their provisions with emaciated inmates, displaying kindness towards victims of the system German troops had served. Between 1945 and 1946, German prisoners of war went back to a country in ruins. Numerous inmates had put on substantial weight while captive in America, whereas family members back home lost weight from hunger under supposed freedom. They arrived with first-hand knowledge of plenty in a land stripped bare. Health checks confirmed German prisoners generally returned in better physical shape than at capture. They rejoined loved ones whose strength had been eroded by lack. Manifest evidence of America's abundance contrasted unmistakably with German want. Many prisoners brought home their final Red Cross packages, chocolates, coffee, and tins which became treasured possessions. Children who could no longer recall how chocolate tasted received Hershey bars from fathers who had eaten ice cream regularly behind barbed wire. Former prisoners of war unexpectedly became champions of the Marshall Plan. They had observed firsthand that American plenty was not a zero-sum affair but stemmed from manufacturing, not conquest. Their conviction that Americans could afford to reconstruct former foes fostered German willingness to accept U.S. assistance. These former prisoners recognized that America's strength came from its ability to produce, not seize. They had seen firsthand a society rich enough to squander food even during a world war. This paradigm, creating rather than conquering, would shape the West German economic model. The West German economic miracle of the 1950s owed something to knowledge gained in American captivity. Former prisoners who had seen American methods for mass production, efficient distribution, and endless goods later implemented these insights in the rebuilding of Germany. They discovered that large-scale manufacturing made luxuries commonplace. Uniformity enabled both quality and productivity. Consumer plenty supported political tranquility. Industry run democratically could surpass totalitarian efficiency. Lessons delivered through Coca-Cola and ice cream left a mark on a new generation of German industrial and political leaders. The transformation in German prisoners of war brought about by American food abundance is backed by military quartermaster files, International Red Cross documentation, company production figures, notably Coca-Cola's archives, prisoner correspondence that was censored but preserved, post-war testimonies and autobiographies, and academic inquiry, particularly that conducted by Arnold Krammer. Arnold Krammer, foremost historian of German prisoners of war in the U.S., deduced that the availability of food was key to reshaping beliefs. His studies demonstrated that routine American surplus accomplished what formal reprogramming could not: the thorough discrediting of Nazi claims of superiority. The statistics speak clearly. Average prisoner consumption from 1943 to 1946. Calories daily, 3,300 to 3,600. Sugar, 4 pounds monthly in supply. Meat, 32 ounces weekly. Milk, 1 quart per day. Ice cream served frequently during summer months. Soft drinks furnished without limit at 5 cents each. German civilians' rations in the same years. Daily calories, 1,200 to 1,500. Sugar, 280 grams monthly when available. Meat, 10.5 ounces weekly and often absent. Milk heavily restricted. Ice cream unavailable. Soft drinks not to be had. Such gaps were not merely propaganda, but demonstrable fact. Enemy prisoners dined better than German citizens, confirming that American plenty reached even vanquished foes. The American food experience profoundly shaped post-war Germany. Coca-Cola was reintroduced in West Germany in 1949, becoming a mark of the American pact. Ice cream shops styled after U.S. soda counters appeared in German towns. Candy and gum became tokens of recovery. Former prisoners frequently turned into importers of American foods, using insights gained during captivity. They recognized that these goods meant more than flavor. They stood for surplus, freedom, and progress. The arrival of supermarkets in 1950s Germany was driven in part by former prisoners who had seen American grocery stores in operation. They understood that abundance under democracy required new systems for distributing, not just increased output. In countless interviews and memoirs after the war, German POWs pointed to food plenty as a turning point. One ex-Afrika Korps officer told an interviewer in 1975, "We went expecting to vanquish a frail, split America. Instead, we came upon a nation that could hand out ice cream to its foes. That was when we realized our loss was not merely military but total." Another veteran, in a 1985 documentary, recounted, "My first Coca-Cola seemed like consuming tomorrow. It was sugary, sparkling, wholly non-essential, yet available to anyone for 5 cents. That one bottle embodied everything absent from Nazi Germany. It was abundant, open to all, and exuded happiness." Testimonies gathered over the years verify that American food surpluses brought about a change in thinking military defeat never could. Men who had arrived as zealous Nazis departed as witnesses to the bounty of democracy. Historians now consider the POW experience in America a significant case of re-education through demonstration, not propaganda. The initiative worked because it required only observation, not didactic lectures. Prisoners saw American society at its productive peak, with enemies treated humanely. Food's role was central since hunger and contentment are universal languages. There was no denying it. Weight gain and visible health improvements provided proof. 3 steady meals each day plus purchases from the canteen. Prisoners acutely aware of German scarcity compared every meal to their own home experience. Each serving of Coca-Cola stood for the miracle of standardization and distribution. Every dish of ice cream on a Sunday drove home the idea of abundance as something available to all. Children of ex-prisoners of war grew up with stories about the wonders of American prison camp fare. Initially, such tales seemed fantastic, but the recovery of West Germany and the appearance of U.S. products validated them. The legend of American abundance, born in POW camps, shaped generations of German-American relations. Many offspring of prisoners eventually studied or took jobs in America. Drawn by stories of unfathomable plenty, they discovered that reality matched expectation. Grocery stores overflowing with stock, soda counters serving massive desserts, candy aisles with innumerable varieties. This influence, spanning generations, shaped more than individual lives. West Germany's corporate culture internalized lessons about mass consumption, quality through standardization, and markets sustained by democracy. The so-called economic miracle involved more than manufacturing. It was about ensuring abundance for everyone. Today, McDonald's operates more than 1,400 outlets across Germany. Coca-Cola is omnipresent. Ice cream is part of daily life. The shift from shortage to surplus, begun in U.S. prison camps, is now total. Yet the lesson from this story is enduring transformations in ideology driven by surplus, not withholding. By kindness, not brutality. By showing, not preaching. The German prisoners who once doubted that ice cream and Coca-Cola could really exist in American camps ended up seeing, firsthand, democracy's ultimate advantage. The ability to generate and share such bounty, even with adversaries. The history of German prisoners and American food prosperity stands as one of the strangest victories in the past. A war won by largesse, an ideology toppled by ice cream, a worldview undone by a carbonated drink. These former enemies changed not through hardship and punishment, but by exposure to plenty. They had come, sure of German superiority and American frailty. They left, grasping that American dominance rested on such immense productive power it could risk excess with ease. The society willing to hand out Coca-Cola to prisoners for a nickel possessed power beyond armies. The ice cream sundae layered with mountains of ice cream, syrup, whipped cream, nuts, and a cherry on top became a metaphor for the sheer magnitude of American abundance. Each ingredient alone would have exceeded German fantasies, but assembled together, they symbolized unrivaled and casual affluence. The fact that the vanquished could ask for seconds while German children starved revealed how thoroughly Nazi promises had failed. Former prisoners often recalled moments of revelation. The initial effervescence of Coca-Cola, the first mouthful of ice cream, the first bite into a Hershey bar. These tangible memories held more force than logic or debate. They had tasted democracy, and found it sweet. The transformation was absolute and irreversible. Men who had once marched for Hitler came home as champions of abundance, bringing back the radical message that prosperity was the product of liberty, not of conquest. They discovered that the American secret weapon lay not in its armies, but in the ability to treat enemies to ice cream. In the end, those bottles of Coca-Cola and bowls of ice cream dished out in American prisoner of war camps accomplished what armies could not: the profound conversion of the enemy's hearts and minds. The Germans, who once could not quite believe in such prosperity, ultimately became its most fervent witnesses. They returned with the conviction that democracy tasted like chocolate and that freedom sparkled like soda. Their saga serves as a reminder that, at times, true victories stem not from destruction, but from example, not through theft, but through giving, not by cruelty, but by the simple, generous act of handing an enemy a sundae on a hot afternoon. The men who encountered American plenty as wartime captives became the most improbable messengers of liberty, forever changed by the astonishing fact of Coca-Cola and ice cream behind American wire.